I now have the opportunity to introduce a friend of mine. We went to college together. He's done very well for himself in the Howard County Fire Department. He's here today to give us a presentation on the historic Ellicott City flood, July 2016. Chief John F. Butler is a progressive, intelligent, and an individual that cares about the fire service and the importance of training and the importance of sharing information and networking. The Ellicott City flash flood in 2016 devastated homes, businesses, critical infrastructure at the center of Maryland's most historic town. It took less than 2 hours for waters to rise 13 feet, turning the city main streets, residential business districts into raging river. In addition to the extensive rescue operations on the night of the flood, the Howard County Department of Fire and Rescue Services played an essential role in the extended recovery process as the community worked to rebuild. Chief Butler will speak about his department's experience overseeing search and rescue operations, leading initial structural stabilization efforts, assuming leadership role within a Type 3 incident management team, and providing ongoing safety oversight for recovery workers in the weeks and months following this flood. Please welcome Chief Butler from the Howard County Fire Department.
Good morning. Good morning. It's not that early. Well, thanks for joining me today, this morning. You could have been many places, but I'm really honored that you're here and taking a moment to share this experience with me and others who were there. It's good news and bad news. I did this presentation yesterday, so I'm kind of well prepared, and I've already had at least one run with it, so that's the good news. The bad news is yesterday's presentation was 90 minutes, and I have to do this in 30 to 40 minutes. So it's going to be interesting and a challenge. The thing about the Ellicott City flash flood that we'll talk about, this was not a one-dimensional incident. It was probably the most complex thing I could have ever seen, experienced, heard of, or read about, various aspects. The other challenge to this was me being here on this stage. I'm going to try and focus on the fire department's role. I could have economic development up here for 4 hours. I could have inspections, license, and permit here and doing their piece, and everyone would have a big role. Challenging part to keep it focused to fire and rescue. So I'll go forward now. So Ellicott City, this is not the first flood. If you've been around Maryland for any amount of time, you've heard of or seen or experienced floods in Ellicott City, Maryland before. Typically, they came from the bottom up, what we call bottom up, from the Patapsco, and kind of rose into the city. Nonetheless, Ellicott City has had its share of waterlog, if you will. Chris, why don't you go ahead and hit that link, and the link sets the tone of what I'll be talking about here.
The 2016 Ellicott City flood was a body blow to a historic community that we so dearly love. 2 lives were tragically lost, 190 residents and 94 businesses were displaced, and 550 employees found themselves out of work. The damage was in the millions. It has been difficult for all of us to watch our friends and neighbors filled with despair and disappointment as they pick through the debris. But their resolve to overcome this event has been inspiring. We moved as quickly as possible to begin the recovery process, balancing the needs of those affected with our concern for public safety. There has been an unprecedented outpouring of support for near and far for Ellicott City, and we are committed to rebuilding in a way that will preserve the town's rich heritage and make it a model of resiliency for the future. It won't be easy. It will take time, but together we will overcome this. The video you are about to see recounts what happened that evening and offers context to help you better understand the challenges we face.
If you look at the amount of rainfall that fell across central Maryland, there was a wide swath of 4 to 6 inches, which is a lot of rain, caused a lot of problems all the way from Montgomery County all the way to Baltimore across Anne Arundel County. So there's a lot of flooding this day, but the absolute worst of it, the highest amount of rain, almost if you drew a basin map of the Ellicott City watershed, which is a very small area in Howard County, it was right there. So you're putting the most amount of rain from an exceptionally rainy system that was putting down a lot of that in a short period of time, and probably the worst part of Maryland that you could put it in. You can see some of these individual elements moving across Ellicott City. That red is exceptionally heavy rain because of a very damp day, but then once the system starts, you can see how it just keeps forming in the background and in the back area of the thunderstorm, and you get this area of rain that's moving west to east, but at the same time, the area to the west keeps forming thunderstorms. So that train of red, basically, which is, again, exceptionally heavy rain, lasts over the area for, a couple of hours, which is, a long time for that rain to pile up. I liken Ellicott City for flooding almost like those towns in California that are on the San Andreas Fault. I mean, things are usually fine. You'll get trouble every now and again, a minor earthquake, something like that. But when the big one comes, there's a lot of people that are just in a harm's way down there.
Try to pay attention to the timestamps and the progression in time.
We are at Dean Hall in Old Ellicott City on Frederick Road. The water is above the doors coming in the building. We need somebody to come in. What's your address? What's our address? Is it 8059? Yes. Okay, are you able to go to a higher level of the building? We can't get up there without going outside. Okay. 8059 Main Street? Okay, I'm going to start the fire department out there, okay? Thank you very much. All righty. I think we have 8 people. 8 people inside the building right now? Yes. Okay, we're going to have them out there, okay? Thank you very much. The building is buckling. There's water on the inside. And we can feel the ceiling crumbling a little bit, the stuff on the ceiling. Is there any way you guys can get out of the building so that you can get somewhere safe if you think the building is in jeopardy? Not without going out into the street with rushing water. How high is the water outside? Oh my, it is up to the front door, up 3 steps. Okay. It is probably above a foot above the sidewalk. Okay. It's more, probably more. Okay. We have no place to go up. Okay. And there are, oh my God. What's going on? There are cars flying down the street. Howard County 911.
Port College Restaurant, Ellicott City, completely flooded.
What's your address?
I don't know the address.
What's the name of the restaurant again?
Port College Restaurant. It's in Ellicott City on Main Street. It's flooded all the way to the top of the first floor. Everybody's evacuated to the top floor.
You said up to the top floor?
Yeah, there's 3 stories. They're on the first floor. They're on the second floor.
And you evacuated?
Nobody could evacuate. There was nowhere for them to go. It's rapidly rising.
Cars are starting to move along.
Yes, hi, this is the Phoenix Emporium.
Yes.
We are currently underwater, and I have about 15 to 30 people in here, and we are trapped inside. I just did not know if all the power in the area was turned off or not, because I don't
Okay.
got a lot to come down.
Okay, we already got a call in for you, sir. We'll be out there as soon as we can.
Okay.
And you said how much water is in the building?
In the building, we have we have a basement which is completely flooded, and on my first floor, we're about 2 feet up. I have 3 floors total.
I'm just making sure you're aware of the situation in Ellicott City, Main Street.
That is flooding?
The flooding is an understatement. I mean,
We are completely aware.
Okay.
Okay, we're trying to get out there as quick as we can, okay?
Yeah.
Okay, are you stuck anywhere?
We are safe. We are in the upper. They pushed us to the upper stories.
Okay, where are you at?
We are at Ellicott Mills Brewing Company.
Is that building flooding also?
Yes. Okay, there's no fire. No fire. It's just all the power went out, and they just pushed us to the second floor. There's a whole bunch of people here, but we're safe. We're okay. We just wanted to make sure someone knew about the flooding.
So thank you. The slide summarizes what we just saw. Rain cover. It started at about 6:30. Within 6 hours, 6 inches of rain, and you've heard of it being 1 in a 1,000-year storm. I hate that saying. Okay, it sends a misnomer that it'll be a long time before we see something like this again. That's not terribly accurate. It could happen again this summer. Okay, but we pray and hope it won't. One more short video, 2 minutes. Chris, if you could hit that one. I'm trying to adjust the presentation.
Now to the historic flash flooding being called a 1 in a 1,000-year event that destroyed a Maryland city. A state of emergency has been declared in the area where at least 2 people have been killed and dozens of others had to be rescued from the rushing waters. NBC's Tammy Leitner takes us into the disaster.
These devastating images are our first look at all that's left of Main Street in historic Ellicott City. Just 48 hours prior,
get inside!
Rushing floodwaters swallowed the town.
There's people in the water!
Destroying everything in their path. These residents formed a human chain to save a woman trapped in her car.
I'm just glad that we managed to save her.
More than 100 people rescued, but at least 2 dead. 38-year-old Joseph Anthony Blevins and 36-year-old Jessica Watsula. Ellicott City sits in the Patapsco River Valley, surrounded by steep hills. As severe weather hit the area Saturday night, 6 inches of rain fell in just 2 hours, overwhelming the small streams that flow into the river and causing water to surge down Main Street.
It was so fast. It was horrifying.
Gretchen Shuey still hasn't been able to assess the damage to her coffee shop.
I actually watched video of the street as it was flooding and just could experience the terror of these people.
All of this was cars everywhere.
NBC News was taken deep inside the destruction zone.
This is ground zero. It's safe to say that they're all damaged by some degree of water.
Now more rain is expected this evening, which could add to the devastation. Tammy Leitner, NBC News, Ellicott City, Maryland.
Hey, NBC News fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on
Okay,
that
no more
button down
videos. I just
here,
wanted to
and click on any of the
show
videos
you
over
how,
here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights.
So after the storm, you saw the storm, you saw what the damage looks like. Now comes the response, the initial response. So this is the 911 recording of the response initially. Once we got those 1,000 calls, actually we were on the streets already. We're up and down Route 40 and many other places in the county already addressing flooding. Ellicott City, Main Street became the ground zero. Chris, you can hit that real quick for me.
Water Rescue 2-13, Main Street, Ellicott City.
EMS 2 heard Alpha 1.
All units hold the air unless you have an emergency. Water Rescue Box 2-13, Ops 10, Tower 10, 105, Water Rescue 10. Water Rescue 2, Engine 71, Baltimore County Engine 4. Ambulance 96, Code 10, EMS 2, Battalion 2, Safety 1, Tower 2 respond. The area of Main Street, between Rogers and Klein, reported vehicle trapped in swift water. Those units respond and operate. Bravo 1 for the water rescue on Main Street in Ellicott City. 1955, units hold the air.
We have 3 special ops stations. There's a central one at River Spark, and then Ellicott City has a detachment of special ops, and then Southern Howard County, Skaggsville has a detachment. Gratefully, we had special ops close by, up the street at that station, and they were able to mobilize. Everyone, that's probably the first time in my career that every unit in Howard County was on an incident. Every unit in Howard County was on an incident. I don't think I've seen that in my 25 years. It may have happened, I just don't think I recall it. So we mobilized, the captain in the middle is the special operations captain. We were able to get that quote-unquote first alarm of swift water rescue techs on the scene and some other special op assets. Speaking of resources, if there's one thing you take away from this was not a Howard County incident. This was a regional incident. There is nothing we could have done successfully without everybody pitching in. Obviously, we had Howard County's units, a lot of logistical support, a lot behind the scenes, and you can probably relate to that. I want to talk a little bit about the volunteer fire companies. No one had to dispatch West Friendship or Elk Ridge or other units into Ellicott City. Their situational awareness got on the street and started taking calls. My first walk down Main Street with a county executive, I think one of the first people I ran into was the volunteer chief from West Friendship, Mickey Day. And I said, what are you doing here? This is an Ellicott City thing, until I got a sense of the breadth and depth of the incident. It was not an Ellicott City thing. And it certainly wasn't a Howard County incident, ultimately. As you can see, Baltimore County, Baltimore City, and the region all stepped in. I was really impressed, and it's noteworthy that on my way to the EOC, the state had already dispatched a MEMA rep towards the EOC. And they stayed around the clock for weeks. Governor Larry Hogan, he threw the kitchen sink at this incident. Every agency in state government, somehow or another, were participating in one way or another. I'll talk more specifically about MSP, National Guard, and DNR. Okay, for the sake of time, that kind of summarizes what you might have seen already on the videos. Baltimore County observes an occupied car floating down Patapsco River. Actually, we saw a lot of occupied cars. It's, without taking anything away from the 3 people that perished, it is amazing that 3 people perished. The amount of vehicles that were occupied, going down a landlocked tsunami. I mean, I don't know what else to call it. You know, this was several feet, 3, 4, 5, 6 feet of water at times. This was not a stream. As fast as it came in, it receded rapidly as well, which was great for us. There was a lot of self-extrication. As it started to recede, we were in a place where we were comfortable putting our people in the water to rescue many. As one of the videos talked about, over 100 rescues. We stopped counting. Honestly, till today, we don't know how many we rescued or helped self-extricate. We just stopped counting. It wasn't that important anymore at that point. So, like I said, we started to access Lower Main Street. Centennial Dam, which is up the hill some, with all the gauges, started to indicate failure. Again, another thing to take away from this room, I would be doing a different presentation if Centennial Dam had failed. If the dam had failed, we would have been up the river. No pun intended. That's pretty good. Impressive that I came up with that. So the damage, as shown in the video, I'm going to show you just some photos. Everything in the town was undermined. The buildings were undermined, sidewalks, streets. One of the most nervous moments for me as the fire chief was watching our folks work on Main Street. So let me explain some of the hazards. There were hissing from gas lines that were busted. There were arcing wires. There were transformers going up. The ground wasn't stable under your feet. There was still water and unstable surfaces. All of this was in the first hour. And I'm standing there going, my safety brain was like going short wired. It looked like a war zone. I said yesterday, and I'll say it again, I don't talk military too much, but I've seen what war zones look like after bombings and after battle. And that is the closest thing I can relate this to. Several combat tours that I'd never seen anything like this other than on the other side in some other faraway land. Some other stats, we already talked about the amount of calls. 72 victims were rescued that we counted from the water. 155 evacuated on their own. I already talked about the gas leaks and water main breaks. And this is about, we believe, a 72-inch underground culvert that has been there for a while and water, and it was made to prevent some flooding. Cars, and you might have seen in the videos, there were cars that would come up to drainages like this, go in looking like a car, and come out looking like a crushed beer can. Just the force of the water. You couldn't identify a car from, you know, a mass of crinkled metal. Initially, we set up 2 divisions, east and west, and later we did a Main Street and River division. And by day 3, we had a better clarity on our structure. In the first hour, we knew we would need some help, and we called for an incident management team. We called for a Type 2 team, but a Type 3 showed up, which was all fine, and Pennsylvania IMT showed up. And another thing to take away from this, and I'll say it at the end, we put together a blended team, a blended IMT, as it shows up there. Although Pennsylvania IMT was the anchor, we had National Capital, Colorado, Virginia Beach, and our own Baltimore Region IMT who did logistics. It's going to be hard for you to see back there, but the blue is the West Division and the ABC, and then what was new to me somewhat was a River Division. The River was an incident of its own. Lots of search and rescue and damage assessments were our first missions. Working with the county's inspections, licenses, and permits folks, we were doing a lot of inspecting and damage assessments. Again, being that the water came down into the city and a lot of these buildings were built over the rivers and the streams, the rise of the water came up under buildings. So you would go through doors and walk in and it looks like a little forest. More vegetation was on the inside, pushing outward because it kind of came through the floors, if you will. A lot of ground started to give way. We had a truck company sitting here with their ladder truck, and they had to retreat because that wall started to cave. It's now retained and stabilized, and we were concerned that church was going to go. Just more pictures of this surrealness that we saw that day. Real quiet town that time after the incident, and you hear the hissing and the arcing and sparking. Very surreal, very surreal. I was explaining this a little while ago. Note how much woods and trees and branches are inside that had come up from under the floorboards. Okay. This picture is worth stopping and pausing on. It's a tale of two stories, actually. So clearly, the building on the right looks pretty damaged. You would wonder if it's even worth salvaging. And at times, we didn't think it was worth salvaging. We postponed allowing citizens back into town because of structures like this. Now, take note of the building to the left of it. That seems to be generally intact. The building to the left is a reconstruction. It's a rebuild from a fire in 1999. I was on it, and some of you were as well. The last time Ellicott City caught fire. And that building was rebuilt with updated codes. I pause for a minute for the story to tell itself. Building on the left, updated codes. Building on the right, not so much. Okay. If you need this photo in your jurisdictions to your government, reach out. I'll be happy to share it with you. The power of codes and enforcement and sticking with it and being disciplined to stick with it. It saves lives. 3 to 4 foot, we stopped calling it mud. We just started saying the river. The river's on Main Street because that's what was on Main Street, about 2-3 feet of the river. It was now in the middle of the town. Our special ops did a lot of shoring operations in those early days. There was no structure that we thought was super safe. And they increased. The more we assessed and realized they were safe, we started to open our minds to allowing the community back. Let me touch on the community for a second. And it's probably, sociologists have probably studied this. Early on, they were patient and forgiving. After about 3 to 4 days, they started getting angst and agitated. And we were getting bombarded with complaints. The more we talked and shared information, the more we told them what to expect, the more we told them to expect flexibility, and we might change our minds, and we might change our timelines, the more patient they became with us. We could start off in the morning saying, today at 2 o'clock, you'll be allowed back in your structures. But then about 1 o'clock, we'll say, no, we got to change our mind, you can't. You can only imagine how the community felt about that at first. But they sooner or later understood and were patient with us to as much as they could. More shoring, more building stuff. This picture is just a fun picture because one of our captains, Josh Zulik, celebrated his 30th birthday, I think it was, that night while he was working, and the crew was able to find a couple of cupcakes and make something of it for him. Maryland Task Force, again, the region. We couldn't have done this by ourselves. And I talked a little bit about safety and my uneasiness with what was happening. What we ultimately did was assign a safety officer to every division. Not any safety officer, but a special ops safety officer who had a little bit more breadth and depth of subject matter expert and structural assessments, atmospheric monitoring. The river was an entire mission, decon, and escorting people back to their homes. So when we escorted someone back to their structure, we would send a safety officer with them. And they would be able to say, yeah, you can go in and get your stuff, or no, you can't go in because that beam is about to come down, or whatever the case might be. The impact of the Tiber River, now we're concerned about these piles of debris that could potentially have a damming effect, as in a damming effect if there were more rain. If there were more rain, we had all this debris and cars in the river, that in the streams, that could be an issue. Wait, it got even better. I told you this was a very complex incident. So all of this, what I'm talking about, is happening, and then there's a sewer line break. But the sewer line break isn't where you can access it and fix it. It's down and inaccessible, no road. The roads are out because of the storm. And so, yeah, now raw sewage is pouring into the Patapsco. But wait, we have to get people in the Patapsco to go search those cars. So, again, this is probably one of the more complex things I've seen. Well, what do? We asked for help. We said, Army National Guard, send some helicopters. We'll collect the material in a parking lot. You drop your tether, you pick it up, take it into the woods, drop it off, take the people over there to fix it, and fix it. Every resource that was available, most resources that were available in the state of Maryland, had a role to play in here. We flew several sorties to get that sewer line fixed. Health department had to give our people Hep A shots and some other prophylactic shots before they got into now sewer contaminated Patapsco to go search the cars for people. So search and rescue, medical aid stations. We didn't have a whole lot of ambulance transports, only a couple, 2 or 3. cut a hand or two, and some heat issues. The health department and the hospital set up aid stations up and down the city, and that was a big relief for us. The muck out became a full-time operation. Citizens wanted to get into their places. Some wanted to clean it. Remember, we had 4 stakeholders: tenants, the owners of buildings that the tenants lived in, merchants, and the owners of those buildings. We had a residential area, a commerce area, some were renters, some were building owners. So you could be looking at one address and dealing with 3 customers: the tenant downstairs, the building owner, and a renter who rents the apartment upstairs. So that was a little interesting. I'll touch on gators for a second. I'll do it now. A lifesaver, gators. Yet the biggest pain in the backside I can think of. That became gold. Gold commodity, gators. Everybody needed one, everybody wanted one, everybody had to have one. Okay, we depleted every golf cart there was in the county and surrounding areas. Everybody was sharing gators with us. But pray tell, if you're assigned a gator, don't leave the keys in it. Okay, it's gone. It's gone before you can blink an eye. Each of these muck out missions you see has only a couple of people in it. In a town of a couple of thousand, you know, that's a lot of micro missions. I'll touch again real fast on the senior policy group and the EOC. I talked about this picture yesterday. It's a lot of people in that room. A very small room in our EOC. If I print that paper and count the heads, there should be only about 5 to 10 people in that room. The senior policy group. And that's how we started, with a senior policy group to make decisions. It ultimately ballooned into information sharing, which is different from making decisions. We had kind of abandoned some of the sit reps and the EOC. The conditions were changing hourly. You could be sitting there writing a sit rep, and the situation had already changed before you were done with your last sentence. So folks just started congregating to get the information in real time. We ultimately left that room, the 5 of us, and went to another smaller room to allow the county executive privilege. In that room, he doesn't have executive privilege. There are things he cannot say in that room, or decisions he cannot make in that space. So you always have to have the executive privilege space, and we had to kind of change that model. I talked about logistics, staging area, big deal. We needed a lot of help. And the river, this is my favorite part. The river was an interesting thing. Every one of those cars, we had no confirmation that there were people in them or not. The closest thing to confirmation was we didn't have a whole lot of missing persons reports. So that was good. So a lot of assets. There are 250 vehicles impacted that were wet or waterlogged. We had to get technical and work through getting about 19 to 22 of them out of the water. And they were usually in these debris piles. As you can see, I struck through piles and called them debris fields, because debris piles is a misnomer. You visually think about a pile, you think about, you know, something triangular and kind of piled up. These were debris fields. And I didn't realize it until I physically went down the river to check them out. And you could conceptually hide a full-size school bus behind some of these fields. I mean, the river had just kind of cleared itself and dumped it downstream. We had cadaver dogs that were getting some hits in some of these debris fields. And that was very concerning. So what do you have to do? You have to kind of tear apart the debris field, which now takes another couple of days in August heat and in a wetsuit, so you can imagine. And thankfully, those hits that the cadaver dogs had hit on were something else, but they weren't human cadaver. Just a picture of a couple of the debris fields. And the technical retrieval of these vehicles were interesting to watch, and so on. That started off as a blue F-150. If you've spent any time on Main Street on a regular basis, the owner of that vehicle always had it parked on the right, up, kind of midway up. It's kind of a unique blue. Everybody knew it. The vehicle was called Big Blue. And Big Blue was ultimately found down in Baltimore County. Big Blue had a personality where he had his own Facebook and Twitter page, help find Big Blue. So, there was a degree of levity and, I don't want to say levity, but, kind of tone it down a little bit and have some fun with it. All those vehicles we found, we had to put them somewhere, and we took them to Centennial High School. The county covered the retrieval and the towing to Centennial, and then vehicle owners would pick it up there and have their tow trucks or USAA or AAA or whatever move them. So the recovery, as I conclude, we're deep into the recovery. I'm impressed. I'm proud. I live in Ellicott City. I have for over 20 years now in the historic district. And so not only am I Howard County's fire chief, I'm a resident of Ellicott City, and I stay close to this. 92% of businesses that were there before the storm are there again within a year. That is nothing but epic, and I can't say enough about our economic development folks who stayed real close to the businesses and they've returned. We were not expecting that. We were expecting somewhat of a ghost town, but they returned. They're real close and cohesive. Planning something next month, and for the 1-year anniversary. Now the conundrum they're having is, we want to keep this private. We want to keep it reverent. We don't want the world to come and gawk at our disaster. And this is our community. We want to keep it close. That's one aspect. The other aspect is, we want the world to come and shop and eat in Main Street, Ellicott City. So they're still working through those pieces, and I'm sure they'll come up with something that's appropriate. Lives were lost there. Okay, lives were lost. 2 in the water, and 1 gentleman who owned a business who, once we allowed them back, was doing work in his business on a ladder and fell and hit his head. So we never forget that. Ellicott City Partnership and Ellicott City Recovery Initiatives has been really active. There's also an H&H study which will take 20 to 30 years. It's a hydraulics and hydrology study where they're now looking to finally and permanently build an infrastructure that this doesn't happen again. I won't be working when that's completed. That's all I'll say. At the lowest end, it'll be a 20-year endeavor. It could be easy 20 to 30 years for them to put the infrastructure in place for that city. All the surfaces that we repaired with asphalt, because we intend to go back and look at underground fiber and taking down some of those poles. This is an opportunity to improve the city from the 1800s and 1700s. Okay, last couple of slides are lessons learned. I'll run through them. I already talked about the blended IMT. We have a lot of talent, a lot of resources here in the state of Maryland. Let's use it. Our volunteers, you think about, okay, volunteers, fire engine, going down the road. I was impressed to see our volunteers raise their hands to say, hey, I'm from Elkridge. Do you need anyone to work the call center? Hey, I'm from Ellicott City Volunteer Fire Department. Do you need anyone to drive gators? So volunteerism can come in all shapes, sizes, and colors. We don't have a seat for everybody on the fire truck, but we had enough work, and all you got to do is ask to help, and I'll put you to work. So, senior policy group, we talked about mutual aid. We had to do. There is no other way we could have been successful. We're really happy with the state and the feds. They came with a good checkbook and a lot of yes we can mentality, and we'll get it done. Information sharing saved our butt from the community. Had we not been pushing hourly everything we could, they could have really turned on us there for a while. But, as citizens, you just want to know what's happening. I know I can't get into my place, but tell me what's happening, and we tried to do that as best as we could. ICS, more organizations need to use it. Fire departments use it all the time, incident command structures. Many others need to get in there. We've been talking about this now for 20 years or more. Other agencies and disciplines need to use the ICS, because when it's not blue sky and it's black sky, every time one of these things happen, we realize we're not on the same page. So we got to do better with that. There's not enough depth on the bench. all our agencies have about 2 operational periods before we're starting to exhaust our people. By the 3rd operational period, you're using exhausted replacement, and it's a vicious cycle. I don't know the solution to that. I showed you the picture of the EOC in space. Space is an issue. We build things, we set up incident EOCs and EOPs for, again, blue sky. When the black sky happens and everybody's in the room, that room becomes really small. Feeding, I have feeding up here because feeding became a challenge. I'll give you an example. Let's say I give my credit card to someone and I say, go out and buy 100 meals for the 100 people that are working today, 100 firefighters that are working today. So he comes back with 100 meals. Well, the firefighter's standing next to the cop, who's standing next to the inspector. Who's feeding them? So now the 100 meals, you know, it's kind of a mission creep. I sent them to buy food for 100 firefighters, but there's about 4 times that work group in about 2 feet of each other. So there's that thing. The other thing is, let's say he did go out and buy 400 meals and showed up with 400 meals and pulls up and there's a Famous Day catering truck dropping off another 1,000 meals. Because people were doing that. People were making casseroles and just bringing it down to the parking lot or to the incident command post or the base of operation. People were just bringing food, you know, and you can't rely on it. You can't count on it because it might not be there in the morning. So you still got to buy food. So food had a whole thing to itself that kept us busy. And I talked about the gators already, so that says it all. Micro missions were a big deal. Getting in the gator and allowing people with an escort to go down and get something. Some examples of that. Gentlemen, I remember this vividly. I just need to get in my apartment and get my credentials. I work at the NSA. I just need to be able to go to work. My cards so that I can get into the building. That's all I need. How do you say no to that? Get in the gator. I'll go down there with you. I left my pet parrot. Hasn't been fed for 2 days. Give me 3 minutes. I'll go down there. I'll grab the cage. I'll come out. We're good. Those micro missions brought the angst down. 1 trash bag of clothing made the world of a difference. No one ever came to us and said, I'll be homeless. I'm homeless if I don't go in there. Everyone had a place to go, but they needed something. They needed something from there, and allowing them to get that something, they were living in a good place and allowing us to go to work. So those micro missions is something we should always keep on our radar. And I think that's it. Just 40 minutes or so. Yesterday we went much more in depth, and I apologize if I couldn't, and it seemed like I was talking fast. So, are there any questions? Okay? All right. All right, well, thank you.